Ngowi TV, informed economists and business perspective.
The G, that is government expenditure. So when the government reduces expenditure, really, the economy suffers, income suffers, multiplier effect gets reduced. So whereas it's okay to reduce debt, to reduce expenditure, we should avoid really overdoing, because again, it has an impact on the private sector, and by extension, it will also have impact on the revenue that we are going to get in terms of direct and indirect taxes. Again, there are issues of national debt, which has really been increasing. It has increased by 9.2% for just a year, between March last year and March now. But also, you could see, at least what is coming from the minister is the debt is still sustainable. Maybe it's okay for the figures, but issues of national debt have been revolving around the axis of the speed with which the debt is increasing. And what is the issue? It's not a sin, really, for a country to be indebted. If it borrowed well and spent on development expenditure rather than recurrent, it's okay. Because when you are borrowing, you are creating liabilities. But then if you turn these liabilities into assets in terms of infrastructure, roads, ports, airports, education, health, that's no problem, really. In the long run, it's going to pay. So those are part of issues. But now the question is on debt servicing. Because when you do debt servicing, you forego, from economics point of view, you forego some public goods and services, education, health, water, you name it, in order to balance the accounting books of the North, if to use Nyerere's words. So this year's budget, you could see almost 9 trillion shillings, that is almost 27%, is going to be used to pay the national debt, So those are part of the issues of concern. Budget policies for 2017-18, again, it revolves around the axis of industrialization. In line with the 5 years development plan, we want GDP to grow to 7.1% from 7%. There are a number of discussions really on economic growth, where we are saying really maybe what is needed is not only growth really. We would wish to see inclusive growth. We wish to see a growth that creates jobs. We wish to see a growth that reduces poverty. Unfortunately, in Tanzania, this has not been the case for several reasons that we may decide to discuss later. In terms of inflation, we want it to remain within single digit, around 5 to 8%. And Tanzania's inflation essentially has been mainly structural than monetary. If you read the structural school of thought of inflation against monetary, really ours has been mainly structural in terms of electricity that is not so much reliable, that is highly costly, infrastructure that is not in good shapes, etc., etc. So if we fix that, I think we can remain within a single digit inflation. Again, we want, in terms of domestic revenue to be around 15% of GDP, etc., etc. I'm skipping some of issues or some of the details here. But then, in terms of imports, we wanted to have 4 months of import coverage. What does this mean? It means that we have to produce and export a lot in order to get enough foreign currency to support our imports. And it has a lot of implication now on the production and supply side of the economy, because if you have to export really, you need the competitiveness in terms of what it takes in business environment to be able to produce and export competitively in order to get that foreign exchange that will support your imports for the coming 4 months. And this is, of course, for a poor man's economy, 3-4 months maybe are okay. Other developed countries, they are talking in terms of years. But so if we maintain 4-3, maybe it can be okay. Revenue policies, of course, it revolves around, again, on issues of electronic devices in terms of revenue. It revolves again on broadening the tax base through formalization of the informal sector. And I've written several times in here, including a book chapter, on why it is so challenging to formalize the informal sector. Again, it's a process. It's a process that has a lot of issues. If you talk to the people who are in the formal sector, and we think almost 60% of economic activities in Tanzania are in the informal sector, the first place they'll tell you, the moment you formalize, the taxman comes. So really, they would escape formalizing. But also, when it comes to formalization, there are a lot of issues on the processes, on the papers work that is needed, come tomorrow, come yesterday, you know, those kind of stuff, the bureaucracy. So I've always argued, and I'll argue again, when it comes to formalization, it should be really a question of stick and carrot. You know, if those who are in the informal sector, they should come at a point where they see, I have graduated and I now need to formalize. But formalizing through stick, through punishment, it's bad economics, and it won't work, in my view. Again, and this has been coming in year and year, but I'm sure the size of the informal sector has almost remained more or less the same, if not really increasing. There are issues of revenue policies intended to increase the non-tax revenue, because, again, part of what Tanzania has not been doing well when it comes to tax and non-tax revenue sources of budgeting, we have been doing relatively okay. Relatively, I'm saying, in the tax revenue, but in non-tax revenue, really, it's a very small contribution. The question of property tax, I think it has been emphasized a lot, whether it is a formal or informal taxes. I mean, property, it has to be taxed, and I think correctly so, really. Only now that is going to be collected by TRI in Tanzania mainland and ZRB in Zanzibar Revenue Board. But also the question of land formalization, those who have been following with Minister Lukuvi know exactly those kind of stuff. But also there have been discussion around the reduction of unnecessary exemptions, and I've written several times on this, that exemptions are okay, incentives are okay, but only those really that make sense to the economy. You know, sometimes you have been over-exempting. You know, if you are to go by history, exemptions, tax incentives began sometimes in the mid-1980s, you know, when this country turned, you know, engaged what we call major and far-reaching reforms in the management of the economy. When you try to attract and retain FDIs, foreign direct investment. Now we are saying it's 30 years later. Do we still have to remain with those? I'm saying essentially yes for some sectors, but then essentially no for some sectors. Those are issues that can be discussed later. I have to go a little bit fast, I think. Issues again on donor, development partners. You know, the key issue is consultation, and I understand the consultants have been led by Dr. Donald Kaberuka, if that's the name, the guy who was at the African Development Bank, to see how really Tanzania can get more money from development partners. Expenditure policies include issues of setting priorities, but also discipline in expenditure. And I think we are seeing this a lot. And again, my problem is when we overdo. The problem is not really having discipline, is when we overdo, and we overdo because of fear. I think that's where my problem is. The question of, again, ensuring value for money, but then state-owned enterprises that are supposed to be profit-making, now they will no longer be getting subsidies. And I think this has been stories all along. The question of controlling ghost workers, I think, came out very clearly. Controlling expenditure, you know, those kind of stuff. And of course, when it comes to procurement, only when there is money, that's when procurement will be done. Again, I don't need to repeat on the priorities: industrialization, human and economic development, business environment. I think, in my view, like business environment is extremely important, you know, and because it covers a lot of things. It covers infrastructure, roads, ports, airports, you name it. It covers education, it covers skills and talent in the labor force, it covers bureaucracy, it covers tax environment, it covers access and availability of finance, you name it, really. So to me, would be extremely important. There are projects there, a standard gauge railway, LNG plant, you know, liquefied natural gas. In my view, when it comes to this, the extent to which these projects have more local content, I think that's when the economy would benefit, you know, in terms of local companies, you know, kind of involved in those. Now I'll skip details here. But then some of the revenue measures include policies and administrative measures to increase revenue. There are quite a number of them, and I'm not really going to go into detail. I think Lauren somehow maybe will be talking about those. But then issues on collecting revenue through electronic devices, issues of property taxes coming again, the question of formalization of the informal sector, use of electronic of EFDs in the ministries, departments, and agencies, etc., etc., etc. But I think the new thing that is coming now is you know, a non-export of minerals from mines. Yeah, you know, where there will be now clearing houses. I don't know how it will work, but then this will be in mines, in airports, ports, and borders. And there will be 1% clearing fee, you know. Those are part of issues. And yesterday I was asked whether it's not an issue in business environment. I'll say let's wait and see. There are issues of improvement in taxes and fees, etc. I will skip again details, but then the key issue, and correctly so in my view, is to increase revenue and of course to stimulate the economy. The VAT Act, for example, exemption on capital goods for industries, textile, oil, etc., etc. Of course, those who are in those sectors are beneficiaries, I would say. Zero rate VAT on ancillary export services at the port, again, to make the port of Dar es Salaam and other ports more competitive. And I think this has been an issue for quite a long time, and of course it has been a tug of war, and we have lost, in my view, some revenue to landlocked countries because when this charge was there, but now it has been removed, and I think it's good. It's a good thing. Again, VAT exemption on animal feed production, which is, I would say, it's also good, and VAT exemption on fertilized eggs for incubation, those kind of stuff. Now I'm skipping some details, again, because of time. Changes on duties. There have been a number of changes on duties, and I understand maybe my colleagues who are on the tax will come so much in detail. Issues of imported water. The key issue, maybe I'll just come with the key issues here. When it comes to duties, the key issue here really revolves around the axis of protecting domestic producers. That is really the key issue. You would see increase on duties on imports and reduction of duties or maintaining same duties for domestically produced goods. And this ranges from water, from juice, from local beer, and non-alcoholic drinks, wines, etc., 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 spirits, you name them. Here, partly it revolves around what I would call the sin taxes. Sin taxes is cigarette, cigar, you name them. Other measures will include the removal of annual motor vehicle license fee for vehicles not in use, and I think that has been really a bad thing because you park your vehicle for 20 years, maybe a souvenir, maybe something in your call it in your museum, yet you have to pay as if it was on road. This really has been bad economics, but now I think things are okay. But I'm not sure whether it has been misunderstood because I see some people celebrating that now, yes, you register only once, but then there will be increase of 45 shillings more per litre on petrol. So you give by the right hand, you take by the left hand. So it may be too early to celebrate. On road traffic laws, including issues of paying for your vehicle only when the car is bought and not annually, I think that's okay. Exemption and amnesty for all interest, debt, etc., etc. And this was highly applauded. But my question is the numbers. How much are we talking about here? I'm not sure whether the celebration that came when this was announced is, because without knowing how much really you have been forgiven, if it's only a few hundred, few million shillings,